Aisha returned home expecting comfort, expecting familiarity. But the moment she stepped through the front door, something felt off. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and that should have been a relief after weeks of chaos outside. Instead, it sent a cold chill down her spine. She clutched her suitcase tighter, the wheels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Each step toward her room felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself resisted her presence. Her heart thudded with unease she couldn't yet name. She had been away for work, just a few weeks, but the thought of returning home had been something she had waited for with longing. The smell hit her first, a mixture of unfamiliar cologne and varnish from new furniture. It was wrong, and she knew it the second she opened the bedroom door. Her room was unrecognizable. The bedspread she had loved for years was gone, replaced with a crisp, pale-colored set she had never seen. Her books, neatly stacked on the shelves in precise order, were missing. Her closet doors were left wide open, the shelves mostly bare. The clothes she had spent months arranging were nowhere to be seen. Even the small framed photographs of her parents and her childhood friends had disappeared. The quiet devastation of her loss hit her like a punch to the stomach. She had not just lost a room. She had lost memories, pieces of herself, and the safe haven she had built within these walls. Behind her, Nadia, her sister-in-law, appeared in the doorway, calm and collected as though this were nothing extraordinary. "We needed the main bedroom," Nadia said, her tone smooth, almost rehearsed, as if she had anticipated Aisha's reaction. "You were gone for weeks. We assumed you wouldn't mind." The words were casual, almost cruel in their simplicity, stripping Aisha's chest of the air she didn't realize she was holding. She turned slowly to face her, searching for any hint of hesitation or remorse. There was none. Nadia's eyes were steady, unapologetic, and faintly smug. Aisha's mind spun. "Where are my things?" she asked, her voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. It was a question that carried more than curiosity. It carried shock, hurt, and the disbelief that someone so close could erase her presence so completely. Nadia's husband, Samir, appeared beside her, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. His expression was equally unreadable. "Most of it was old," he said, as though that explained everything. "Some went to storage, some we threw away. The house needed a fresh start." The words lodged in Aisha's chest. Threw away. Fresh start. They sounded clean, almost sterile, but they felt like knives. This room was not just a place to sleep. It had been her sanctuary after her parents passed away. It had been the only space where she felt completely herself, where she could cry, laugh, read, or sit in silence without judgment. And now, with a few casual words, it had been taken from her. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress unfamiliar under her hands. She traced the surface, remembering the nights she had cried here alone, the laughter she had shared with friends who had visited, the small victories she had celebrated when nothing else in life felt right. Everything was gone. The room was clean, perfect, but sterile. The history she had poured into it, the memories that made it hers, had vanished, and in their place, an alien sense of ownership had settled. Aisha wanted to yell. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to reclaim what was hers. But she didn't. Shock had rendered her silent, her body numb, while her mind raced. She remembered the letters she had written but never sent, tucked in the drawer, now emptied. She thought of the small trinkets she had collected over the years, the souvenirs from trips and friends, the little reminders that life could be joyful even in sorrow. All gone, thrown away, stored, or repurposed, as though they were nothing. Her thoughts turned to her sister-in-law. Nadia had always been confident, controlling in ways that could feel suffocating. But Aisha had never expected betrayal like this. They had grown up together, sharing birthdays, holidays, family meals. She had trusted her. And now that trust was broken, replaced with cold efficiency. Aisha's mind struggled to process the injustice. She replayed the moment Nadia had spoken, her words precise and unyielding, and Samir's quiet support. They were aligned partners in this erasure, and she was alone that night. She slept in the guest room, the thin mattress barely supporting her weight. The ceiling above offered no comfort. She turned over again and again, thinking of the room that was hers only yesterday, and now belonged to someone else. She imagined walking into her room and finding her things restored, but the vision was fleeting. Reality had already rewritten itself. The sense of betrayal seeped into her bones, and sleep came reluctantly. In short, broken intervals. Morning brought no relief. The house felt different, unfamiliar. Aisha moved through it quietly, avoiding the main bedroom, pretending not to notice that her sister-in-law now lounged there with a sense of entitlement. Nadia hosted friends with effortless charm, showing off the space Aisha had once called hers. Samir acted as if he were the rightful owner, as though he had earned it by simply claiming it. Each day, the injustice settled deeper into Isis, mind planting seeds of anger she did not yet understand. Aisha began to question herself. Had she been too trusting, too absent? Could she have prevented this if she had returned earlier? Each thought twisted like a knife in her chest. She knew it was not her fault, yet the self-doubt crept in like a shadow, subtle but persistent. Her mind drifted to revenge, fleeting images that made her pulse quicken. She imagined confronting them, demanding justice, showing them the consequences of their actions. The desire for retaliation felt natural, almost justified, but with it came fear. What if revenge corrupted her? What if it made her lose herself entirely? Despite the fear, one thing became clear. She could not stay silent. The betrayal demanded acknowledgement. But first, she had to gather herself, to understand the depth of the wound, and to decide what she would do with the anger that churned. In her stomach, Aisha realized she was standing at a crossroads. One path promised rage and confrontation, the other patience and careful planning. Both were dangerous, both irresistible. As she lay awake that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling in the guest room, she made a silent vow. She would not let this betrayal define her. She would reclaim something more important than a room or possessions, her sense of self. How she would do it, she did not yet know. But one thing was certain, the story of that room, and what was done to her, was far from over. The seeds of revenge had been planted, but the harvest was still months away. And in the quiet, Aisha felt the first stirrings of resolve. Sharp and undeniable, promising that nothing would remain the same. The days after returning home became a careful act of survival for Aisha. She moved quietly through the house, avoiding the main bedroom like a forbidden zone. Nadia and Samir acted as though nothing had happened, their confidence in taking over the space growing with each passing hour. Guests arrived, laughing and chatting, praising the newly organized room. Aisha felt invisible, as though she were a ghost haunting her own life. Every smile from Nadia, every casual remark about our room, twisted the knife of betrayal deeper. At first, Aisha tried to ignore it, focusing on small tasks around the house. She cleaned, did laundry, cooked, all while suppressing the anger that bubbled just beneath her skin. But the quiet moments at night were the hardest. She would sit alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the bed she had loved, the books she had read while lying there, the quiet hours of reflection that were now stolen from her. It wasn't just furniture that had been taken, it was memories, comfort, a sense of belonging. And as the days passed, the injustice began to fester into a raw, pulsing need for retribution. Aisha started watching them more closely. Nadia, with her practiced charm, seemed unaware of the emotional destruction she had caused. She walked through the house with effortless authority, arranging things just so, making the space completely hers. Samir supported her silently, never questioning the act, reinforcing her claim through passive dominance. Each small action reminded Aisha of what she had lost. She could see how much they believed they were justified. They felt entitled. They felt nothing was wrong. And that made the betrayal sting even more. At night, Aisha began to imagine revenge. She pictured confronting them in front of the family, showing every proof she could gather, the messages, the receipts, the evidence that the furniture and personal items had belonged to her. She imagined shaking them, forcing them to face the consequences of their actions. The images gave her a strange comfort, like a spark of warmth in a cold room. Each fantasy was precise and calculated. She imagined making them feel small, exposed, humiliated. Just as she had felt when she first discovered her bedroom was gone. But even as the thoughts came, she felt a second, quieter voice inside her. "Is this who you want to be?" it whispered. In the darkness, questioning whether acting on anger would truly bring satisfaction or simply add another layer of pain. Aisha hated hearing it, hated the doubt it sowed, but it persisted, forcing her to think deeper. She realized revenge was not simple, was not just about taking something back. It was about becoming someone she might regret. Still, the desire for justice or revenge was too strong to ignore. She began collecting evidence quietly. Receipts from furniture stores, messages between Nadia and Samir that proved they had discarded her belongings, even photographs of her old room to remind herself of what had been taken. Each piece of proof felt like a weapon, a tool she could wield if she chose. But with each addition to her growing collection, the weight on her chest increased. Planning revenge made her pulse quicken, but it also made her question her own morality. Her nights became restless. Sleep came in short bursts, often interrupted by thoughts of confrontation. She imagined every scenario, confronting them calmly, exposing them publicly, taking the items back, even sabotaging their newfound comfort in subtle ways. Each possibility brought a mix of thrill and dread. She recognized the thrill of control, but also the risk of losing herself in the process. The struggle became internal, psychological. Aisha wrestled with two opposing forces: the desire to strike back, to claim justice, and the fear that acting on that desire would make her someone unrecognizable. At the same time, she studied Nadia and Samir carefully. She observed their habits, their routines, the way they interacted with each other and with the rest of the family. Nadia was meticulous, confident, and never second-guessed herself. Samir followed her lead, offering support in silence but reinforcing the power dynamic. They felt untouchable. And that fueled Aisha's drive even more. She realized that any act of revenge would not just be about taking back what was hers, would have to challenge their sense of entitlement, their certainty that what they had done was acceptable. Aisha's planning was methodical. She imagined confronting them not in anger, but with evidence and calm precision. She would not shout, not beg, not plead. She would present facts, letting the weight of truth speak for itself. In her mind, she rehearsed conversations, envisioned reactions, anticipated defenses. Every scenario made her heart pound. The anticipation of confrontation became both an obsession and a torment. She was caught between fear and empowerment, anger and moral restraint. As the days passed, her inner conflict deepened. She recognized that revenge could bring temporary satisfaction, but also long-term consequences. Acting on anger might make her feel powerful momentarily, but it could also damage relationships permanently, harm her reputation, and weigh on her conscience. Yet the thought of doing nothing felt equally unbearable. How could she allow someone to erase her life so casually and simply accept it? The injustice demanded a response, but the type of response was uncertain. Aisha began to notice subtle shifts in her own behavior. She became quieter, more observant, holding back emotions even in interactions with the rest of the family. She smiled politely at conversations, nodded at comments, but internally cataloged every slight, every casual dismissal. She learned to mask her rage behind calm, to move through the house without drawing attention, to act as though everything were normal. The discipline it required was exhausting, but it also gave her a sense of control she had not felt since the betrayal. During these days, the past became a constant presence. Memories of her bedroom, the comfort of her favorite chair, the soft lighting she had arranged just so. The personal touches she had added over years played in her mind constantly. Each memory reminded her of what she had lost, but also of what she valued most: her autonomy. Her ability to create a space that was entirely hers. The loss of that space became symbolic of a larger violation, a theft of agency and dignity. And it fueled the growing fire inside her. At the same time, Aisha began to recognize her own limits. She realized that revenge could not be impulsive. It required patience, planning, and precision. Acting too quickly could backfire, giving Nadia and Samir the upper hand. She had to wait, observe, prepare. And in waiting, she grew sharper, more strategic, more in tune with her own emotions. She realized that the act of planning revenge itself was transforming her, teaching her patience, awareness, and self-control. By the end of the second week, Aisha felt a quiet, simmering power. She had gathered evidence, rehearsed scenarios, and developed a mental map of the confrontation she intended. She still felt anger, yes, but it was tempered by clarity. She understood what she wanted and what she was willing to risk. She knew that when the moment came, she would face a choice: to act on her anger or to rise above it. And the tension of that looming choice consumed her thoughts day and night, making every interaction with Nadia and Samir a test of will. A rehearsal for the ultimate reckoning. In the quiet of her guest room, Aisha realized she had changed. She was no longer the passive observer who had returned to find her room stolen. She was a strategist, a planner, someone who understood that justice, when it was personal, was as much about timing as it was about action. The desire for revenge was no longer just a fleeting thought. It had become a driving force, shaping her days, her decisions, her every movement. Yet beneath it all, there was still a question she could not answer. Would revenge truly satisfy her, or would it simply continue the cycle of pain? And so Aisha waited, watched, and planned, caught between two forces: the raw desire to reclaim what was hers, and the cautious understanding that power could be found in restraint as well as action. The betrayal had opened a door to darkness, and she stood at its threshold, knowing that the next step she took would define not only the story of the stolen bedroom, but also the person she was becoming. The day of confrontation arrived quietly, almost without warning. Kia had spent weeks planning, imagining every reaction, every word, every pause. She carried herself with calm precision, her evidence carefully organized in a folder she clutched. Like a shield, the air in the house felt charged as she approached the main bedroom. Nadia and Samir were inside, laughing softly at something trivial. Unaware that the storm she carried had already reached their doorstep, Aisha knocked, her knuckles tapping lightly on the door. Nadia looked up, eyebrows raised, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You're back early," she said. Samir leaned in the doorway, curious, unsuspecting, confident in the security of their claimed space. Aisha stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. The room, once hers, smelled the same sterile, polished, unfamiliar. It was theirs now, yet it felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with a single touch. She laid the folder on the edge of the bed and opened it, revealing receipts, photographs, and messages. Every piece was a testament, every proof a mirror reflecting what they had done. "I've collected everything," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "Everything you threw away, everything you took. Without asking, I can show this to the family, can make sure everyone knows what happened." Nadia's eyes flickered. The confident mask wavered just slightly. Samir's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists for a moment before he released them. The air between them grew thick, tension so heavy it pressed against Aya's chest. She could feel it, could sense the shift from casual arrogance to unease. For the first time, they were not untouchable. For the first time, the power they had claimed over her life seemed uncertain. Aisha paused, letting the silence stretch. This was the moment she had envisioned countless times. She could unleash every word, expose every truth, demand restitution in full. She could shake the foundation they had built, make them feel small, humiliated, vulnerable the way she had felt. Her pulse raced. Every scenario she had rehearsed played vividly in her mind, each one more intoxicating than the last. But then, a different thought pierced through, sharp and deliberate. Is this what you truly want? The voice was quiet but relentless. It reminded her of the nights spent pacing in the guest room, the endless questions of morality, the fear of becoming someone defined by anger. Ayasa's hands hovered over the folder. She could act. She could tear their confidence apart in seconds. She could reclaim not just her belongings, but a sense of power that had been stolen from her. She took a deep breath and considered the alternatives. Revenge promised satisfaction, yes, but at what cost? Acting out of anger might provide a momentary thrill, but it could also poison her for years. Relationships could shatter, trust could break irreparably, and she could become someone she did not recognize. Walking away, on the other hand, meant relinquishing the immediate satisfaction. But it also meant retaining control over her own life and conscience. Aisha looked at Nadia, saw the faint trace of unease, the shift in posture, the way her confidence had faltered. She looked at Samir, saw the tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible worry in his eyes. And she realized something. She had already won. The awareness of truth had unsettled them, planted seeds of doubt that no amount of bravado could erase. She did not need to humiliate them to reclaim her power. She just needed to claim it silently, deliberately, and on her own terms. "I won't," said finally, her voice calm, resolute. Nadia blinked, confusion flashing across her face. "You won't what?" she asked, still expecting anger. Confrontation, something dramatic. "I won't expose you," Aisha said, letting the words land slowly, purposefully. "I won't make a scene or destroy what you think you've built. I don't want to become someone who heals by hurting others." She paused, letting the weight of her decision sink in. "But I will leave this house, okay? And when I do, I take what matters most, my dignity, my peace, and the memory of who I truly am. You can keep the room, but you'll always know how you got it?" Nadia opened her mouth, then closed it. Smear's jaw tightened once more, but no words came. Aisha stood, her posture strong, unshakable. In that moment, the room seemed to shift around her. The power dynamic had changed. She no longer felt like a victim. She had chosen her path, and that choice itself radiated authority. The silence was complete, filled with an understanding that something irreversible had happened, not through confrontation, but through clarity and control. The decision did not erase the pain, but it reshaped it. Aisha felt a strange mixture of relief and strength. The anger that had once driven her was now tempered by wisdom. She realized that revenge, in its rawest form, could give only temporary satisfaction. The true victory lay in retaining control over her own actions, in deciding how to respond to betrayal rather than reacting impulsively. Over the next few days, she prepared quietly to move out. Packing her essentials, she took time to reflect on everything she had experienced. Each item she carried became symbolic, a reminder that her life was hers to shape. That her peace was not dependent on a room or possessions she sold or donated. What she could not take, keeping only the items that held meaning. Items that reminded her of resilience rather than loss. On her final night in the house, Aisha stood in the doorway of the main bedroom one last time. She looked around at the space that had once been hers, now occupied by those who had taken it. There was no anger in her gaze, only quiet acknowledgement. She had been betrayed, yes, but she had not been broken. She understood that, holding on to resentment could weigh her down, while letting go, even without forgiveness, could free her in ways she had not anticipated. The morning of her departure was calm. Nadia and Samir barely noticed as she slipped out, her movements deliberate and composed. She did not shout, she did not confront, she did not demand recognition. She left with her head held high, carrying with her the knowledge that she had acted on principle rather than impulse. The stolen bedroom no longer defined her, and the betrayal had been transformed from a source of pain into a lesson in self-control, strategy, and emotional intelligence. Isa's new apartment was modest but welcoming. She decorated it slowly, deliberately, with pieces that brought her comfort and joy. Each item she placed was a conscious choice, a reflection of her autonomy. She realized that reclaiming her life was far more valuable than any revenge she could have exacted. The sense of peace she achieved was profound. Even as the memory of betrayal lingered in the background, sometimes she thought of Nadia and Samir, and she wondered how they felt. The confidence they had worn like armor had been subtly pierced, and perhaps they would carry a quiet unease from her restraint. She smiled at the thought. In choosing her path, she had reclaimed her power more completely than any act of vengeance could have delivered. In the silence of her new home, Aisha finally allowed herself to exhale fully. She understood now that revenge could be seductive, offering a false promise of satisfaction. But real strength, real victory, came from knowing when to act and when to let go. From walking away with dignity and tact, from controlling her own narrative rather than being consumed by someone else's. Betrayal. She had faced the moment of decision, and she had chosen wisely. And in that choice, she realized, lay freedom.